All right, you good?
Yep, good.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Bite Meat podcast. Been looking forward to this one for a bit because it's one thing to have Aaron Franklin on, but man, we got Wes Wright. It's one thing to have Chris Shepard on, but we got Wes Wright. All these great pit masters: Grant Pinkerton, Leonard Botello, Sonny Moody. But Wes, we got you, and I'm kind of kidding because I know you have such respect for all these people, but you are the man. I mean, you are the man when it comes to just being at the tip of the arrow, so to speak. For our listeners' sake, I'm going to introduce you properly, and then we'll get into some topics here that I think really all of our listeners are going to be very, very excited and interested in listening. Wes Wright, Cookout News, and I'm going to let you take it from there because what you do is really you're an influencer in more ways than one, not just maybe on social media, but just some of the things that are happening. People can turn to your product, to your outlet, and get all the information they need upcoming. So set it up for us. What Cookout News does on a regular basis.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for having me. Hope I can live up to that intro. Uh, yeah, Cookout News has kind of a unique niche that I don't think was out there, and that's kind of how I founded it. And I'm the founder of Cookout News, of course. Kind of, I'll take you back. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what it is. So it seemed like there wasn't really good coverage of business news stuff happening in the industry of outdoor cooking. There was obviously tons on how to cook, how to be great at grilling and barbecue. And then, but beyond that and recipes, it seemed like there wasn't a website you could turn to that gave you happenings on the industry, new products coming out. And so I just decided to start one. We've been going for about 2.5 years now,
Mm-hmm.
gained quite a bit of traction. And that's kind of what we cover, from everything from business news as somebody buying another company down through grill releases, new grill innovations. And I like to say we stop where the food starts. So we don't cover any recipes, food, stuff like that. Some of those other names you mentioned, go to them for that because they're going to be better at than me. So that's a little bit about what Cookout News is.
And where can people find it? We'll get back to this at the end of the podcast, but since we're here.
Yeah, sure. It's cookoutnews.com.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Now, as we get started here, I do want to remind all our listeners to not to forget to subscribe to the podcast, this podcast, wherever you get your podcast: Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, and really anywhere else that there's a podcast. There's this. It's really been taken off. We really appreciate that from all our listeners. And of course, it's brought to you every week by Texas Star Grill Shop. I know you're familiar with Texas Star Grill Shop, Rick and Corey and the whole gang over there, Wes. So let's get into it now. At the end of the show, we are going to have some cooking stuff for you because we do the smoking hot tip of the week every week, and we're going to be joined by DJ Wenzel with some really good stuff on some binders and when and where and how to use them, etc. But for the purposes of right now on this podcast, what you do is significant. We've established that. Now let's get into some of the things that you've seen. And I'm going to start with the last 15 or 20 years. What have you seen, over the course of this? Because it's a monstrous industry. I don't know if people really understand how many billions of dollars are in this industry, but what has changed the most in this industry that you've seen?
Yeah, I think the industry is unrecognizable to what it was 15 or 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and kind of my perspective on it too. I'll give you that. So I was a mechanical engineer a long time ago, worked for Chrysler. That's my background. And then I got into finance, worked in mergers and acquisitions. So
Mhm.
that's kind of my way of looking at things, my purview of what it is. But about 15 to 20 years ago, you had, Weber, you had Charbroil, and that, I feel like there's some smaller names that have always been there, but that was really it. And people just focused on, do you want charcoal or do you want gas? And then obviously you have some smokers, but that's a much smaller market than it is,
Mhm.
than the others. But through the years, you've developed into, now we have griddles. Those started, I want to say 08 is when Blackstone really first came out with their 36 inch, and those
Mhm.
just exploded through COVID. pellet grills obviously took off. And so then you got this whole technology aspect behind it, with the pellet grills and popularization of that, is that then you see gas grills, charcoal grills, everything starts having tech, where all of a sudden it's not just about, a charcoal kettle that everyone's familiar with. So it's the same thing, replace it every 5-6 years or whenever you need to. Now there's brand new tech every couple years that you can have a grill that's outdated. So you have all these different companies apart from just those two big brands I mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
there's way more options on what you can cook on.
Now, you mentioned technology, and clearly we're going to get into some of that in this podcast because I think that's a big development. But what has been like in terms of the technology, sort of the game changer? And I have one in mind, but I don't want to say it and spoil your moment here. But I will ask you about it. What technology? What's been the best thing to happen in recent years?
Yeah, I think the connection with your phone or remote connection to your grill is a big thing. And when I grew up, obviously just using gas grills and charcoal Weber, that was my go-to always. Then I had I have two little kids, so I could spend a lot less time with my hobby because I can't sit around a grill or a smoker all day. But then once tech started coming into grills and I could monitor my pellet grill remotely, all of a sudden I had new access to my hobby, and I got to spend a lot more time with it. So to me, that's a huge thing, because it makes it so people can spend less time doing it and still, get the benefit and enjoy it. And also it's much more approachable for people, because now people that might be intimidated by grilling or cooking a brisket, all of a sudden they have a step-by-step guide that can walk them through it. So to me, that's the biggest game changer that's happened.
Yeah, that's part of what I was going to say. I was going to be more specific, but I like your answer. Mine is, the probes, the meters, and stuff like that. Even if you are, tending to the fire, you have a weekend and you want to spend some time. A lot of us like to mess with the fire and do that whole process. Boy, I use the meter, but I know there's a bunch on the market. That's a game changer, because you can be anywhere and check the temperature, and it's so accurate, etc. So that to me was what I was going to say.
Yeah, and I'd agree. That's really leads into the tech, and I do the same thing. I have a Franklin barbecue pit that, when I have a day to myself and, I have some time, that's what I do. But I still use, temperature probes in there, just because it's just so much easier to monitor your temperatures that way than to go by feel and, and monitor an analog gauge. So that is huge.
What's coming down the pike? Like you don't have to spill any beans in terms of like secrets, but some things maybe you've heard that might even kind of take us to another level.
Yeah, so I think it seems like with pellet grills, and it's going to be different for each kind of fuel source. Pellet grills are getting more iterative, than from what I've seen over the last 5 years. They're making small improvements. On the grill front, less so on smokers, and some people love this, some people hate it. You're going to see major jumps in electric grilling over the next 5 years. That's something that, WC Bradley, which owns Charbroil, they own Pit Boss, they own Current Backyard, they have a whole handful, Oklahoma Joe's. They have some pretty big patents that are going to change what it means to be a charcoal grill, and that are going to be a lot closer to gas, I think, within the next few years.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we are going to get into the pellet grill conversation here in just a moment. But I've seen some stuff myself, just sort of piddling around on the internet or on my phone. Like, I've seen some hybrids that are out there, and you can use, whether it's gas or electric or whatever, where it's a grill, it's an old school grill, but it also can be a smoker. I think the hybrids might be something that's happening, right?
Yeah, and there's a company called Brisket that they started out making pellet grills, and they're really big into tech and using AI for cooking. But they actually came out with a grill last spring. I don't even know if you can buy it yet, but they have an electric pellet grill hybrid. So they have a heat element in there that's used for regulating the temperature a lot with your grill. And then the pellet grill portion is more for the smoke, but then also they promise to give you a better sear, because you're not just relying on that small fire pot for heat. they also have electric heat within there to make it hotter at the exact same time.
And you know what's funny about this? And I understand the other side of this discussion, this argument. A lot of people think like it's sort of quote unquote cheating, or it's too easy, or you're not a purist and all that. I go on the other side. I think it makes a lot more people a lot better pitmaster. And by default, that gets more people into the industry and more people into the game.
Yeah, I completely agree because it's to me it's and I get the comments too about how even pellet grills are cheating, or they don't like electric grills, that's not real grilling, things like that. To me it's and what we're all about is just it's a hobby. I love outdoor cooking, so I want it to touch as many people as possible. I want as
Yeah,
many people doing
yeah.
it. And somebody that might not do it otherwise, if they have fun with an electric grill or a pellet grill, I think that's awesome, and maybe someday they have that progression into, an offset or something like that. If they don't, great. I just love that more people are doing it. That encourages companies to release more stuff I like too. So I think it's a fantastic thing.
What's your what? Now I'm curious. What's your setup look like? I bet you have 17 different grills in your backyard.
Yeah, so we do grill reviews too, so I cycle through a lot of them. I've pared it down to about 12 to 15
Oh, I
right
was
now.
exaggerating, but apparently I wasn't.
Yeah, no, and it'll get out of hand where, my wife can barely back the car out of the garage because I just have, boxes of grills that need to be put together. And but yeah, any type of grill you can think of, I have a version of.
Well, I mean, good. So okay, like you got to make your boy. This is going to maybe get you in trouble, and I don't mean to. You're going to have 20 people over. You're going to cook a brisket and some chickens. Let's go old school, easy. What are you pulling out, and what are you saying? All right, this is going to work here.
So I have this kind of like, two things that I love with barbecue. If I was cooking for a lot of people, if I have time, I love an offset. That's by far my favorite thing to use is an offset. I
Yeah.
like the activity of tending to the fire. I think the flavor on that, you can't beat with anything else. It's just it's a league of its own. I love an offset. When I can't do that though, I have a just a Traeger pellet grill. I have a Pro 575, which is kind of their standard model that I'd say, they probably sell more of those than any out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it'll get you 70% there, but I can do that and not irritate my wife because I can still help out with getting everything else ready
Yeah.
for people coming over.
Yeah, you and me both. If I have the time, and that's the other thing. Like I do it more now because of the pellet grill. I mean, heck, my wife will sometimes have some sort of casserole or something. She goes, you know what? I bet you'll be good with a little smoke flavor. Can you do this on the Traeger? So I'm lighting that thing up 2-3 times a week. But if I have the time, I'm like, all right, now I'm gonna have me some fun. Kind of what you're talking about with the offset. So it goes back to what we were just talking about, more people in the game. And oh, by the way, you probably become a much better backyard pitmaster, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it shortens that learning curve because with a pellet grill, if you start on that, you don't need to learn fire management. So the grill takes care of that for you. Whereas prepping the meat and and trimming it and getting it ready, seasoning it, that's something you can purely focus on and get good at that, and then not have to worry about, okay, now I also have to learn to manage a fire, because there's so
Mm-hmm.
many variables with barbecue. If you can take some of those out and just really hone in on certain ones, then later you can learn the others. So I think it's awesome.
We're actually going to have Jeremy Andrus, the CEO of Traeger, on the show, I believe, the first week of October, if I'm remembering it right. And that isn't it. That is a total game changer. It's a great story. I'm sure you know it. In case our listeners don't, I mean, it was a company that was not flailing, but sort of just stagnant in 1987. And he took it over with no real knowledge, as I understand it, of being, a pitmaster. I think he said in one interview I saw that his wife was really the one that did the backyard grilling, and then it just boomed. I mean, we all know, you see it at Home Depot and Lowe's and all these other places and stores. Have you ever seen anything like that? I mean, that it became that big that soon.
Yeah, I consider they're very different, but Traeger and Blackstone, kind of their story are so similar, and it's funny because they're both based out of Utah. But
Mm-hmm.
Traeger became synonymous with pellet grill, right? It's nobody says like, "Hey, do you have a pellet grill?" They say, "Hey, do you have a Traeger?" That's what it means. It's like Kleenex, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they rocketed so quickly, and it was fueled, through the pandemic too. That it's really in a league of its own. And they do it. It's not just that it's, the best pellet grill out there. That's very arguable. It's that their branding's so good. Their social media, they focus on it. So they build a community that people want to belong to. It's, if anyone has like a Peloton or something like that, or even Apple products, it
Mm-hmm.
has that brand around it that people want to be a part of, which has just fueled their growth.
Yeah, I'm an Android guy, and I catch more hell than anybody on the planet because I'm so loyal. But they're Apple. They are Apple.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about pellet grills, though, and this is what I want you to speak on here. It is all of a sudden. I mean, you can't throw a rock without hitting a quality pellet grill anymore. I mean, you tell me, but I'm thinking there's probably 10 to 15 high end pellet grills now. Has that become sort of too much competition, or is it a good thing?
I think it's a good. I mean, it's not as good for Traeger. It means that they have more work to do to keep growing, how
Yeah.
they want. But it's good for the consumer, and I agree. When I test pellet grill, it's almost to the point where it's like testing a gas grill. There might be little nuances, little features I like one more than the other, but when you get down to the core function of does it cook well, they all cook kind of similar. They
Mm-hmm.
all do a pretty good job. So I think that's great too, because then somebody at that wants to enter in at a lower price point and can't afford a Traeger, they're still
Mm-hmm.
going to get a solid product that they can use, without having to pay that premium.
Yeah, yeah. Where are we? You mentioned the pandemic, and that was something I wanted to get to also. The boat industry and the barbecue industry went off the charts beginning in 2020. I mean, to the point of they were making more money than they were selling more product than they ever had in their lives. Where are we now as an industry, just in general?
Yeah, and I'd add RVing to that
Oh,
list as
yes.
well.
Yeah.
Anything outdoor related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think right now. So what happened after the pandemic ended? And you had people just wanting to get outside, spending tons of money. Then also all the stimulus checks. You could trace those from the time they got to the bank account directly to sales for outdoor companies. Like you could just watch that spike.
Mm-hmm.
Then so you had that pull ahead of demand. Anyone that wanted to buy a grill in the near future did so during that time, and you had tons of people getting into the market, right? So then you had this huge pull ahead, so you had too much inventory in the system. So all of the big box retailers had way too much inventory, so they stopped buying from the manufacturers for the most part. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that in all their earnings have slowed down dramatically. I think now we've gotten through all that built up supply in the system, and we're getting back to normalcy. The only hang up though is you have, and all the companies that they try to forecast how many units they sell and how big they can get. They
Mm-hmm.
look at they start with their addressable market. They start with home sales, right? So when you buy a new home, you buy one of the first things you do is you go out and buy a grill too, right? To go with your
Yeah.
new home. No one's buying homes because interest rates are high and they're really expensive. So there's the home sales have gone way down. Money is expensive, so also you're not going to finance a grill necessarily for the big ticket purchases. So I think you've worked through all that pandemic buying. Now it's just waiting for the consumer to get back to a more healthy state, to get
Mm-hmm.
home buying going again. And I think you're going to see an uptick in grill purchases, and it may even be slightly higher, I think, than historical levels, because you're going to have demand from that. And if you look at the replacement cycle, people buy a new grill every 5-6 years, according to data I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bought during the pandemic, there's a good chance you're going to want to buy again in the next couple of years. And when you're
Yeah.
coming out of a recession, that's a good time to do it.
And interest rates reportedly are going down. So maybe even
Right.
the home sales, will go up. So does that mean this is an upswing for the industry, that there's going to be more new product and maybe more inventory?
I think next year you'll start to see some growth. They've had declines year over year for the past 2 years, and
Hmm.
I think next year is when you'll start to see it. This wasn't a good summer in the grill industry overall.
Hmm. What about the related products? And we're going to get into some specifics here in just a bit. But rubs and sauces and things like that. I don't know how much you dig into that through Cookout News, but is that something that all of a sudden the competition is maybe starting to wane because everybody, including myself, but for the record, I did it before 2020. Starting their own barbecue sauce or rubs or spices and stuff like that. Is that something where sort of the fat is going to move by the wayside and we're going to have a strong industry there?
Yeah, so the rubs, pellets, charcoal, we call them consumables in the grill
Hmm.
industry. Those are, I think, less reliance on where the economy is, and they're
Hmm.
more about just usage rates for grills. So one thing that Traeger especially reports on is how much people are utilizing their grills, and they're still seeing a lot of people using grills. I just think with rubs and sauces there's so many options. I think overall that market has probably been relatively healthy because people are still using their grills.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think you will see, some players fall out of it just because there's not enough of the pie for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I think you'll see that start happening, in the near future.
Let me ask you this, since we're here and we've talked about sort of the paradigm shifting that Traeger did in the industry. What's the next big thing? And I have something in mind here too, but I want to hear you. Like, what is the next? We mentioned maybe you're going to go back to the hybrids and the electrics and all that, but is there another like, okay, this is going to get people's attention. This is going to be, one of those pioneering type things in the industry.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go back to electric grills as much
Hmm.
as I know a lot of like purists don't like them,
Hmm.
but um, you know, WC Bradley, who I mentioned, owns them. They're all in on electric grills because not only do they think they're a viable option for people that want gas grills, but they think they can market to people that, with that have burn bans, that have apartments, that otherwise want tech and are kind of new to grilling.
Hmm.
I think you're going to see more grill ownership from that, but also the quality of an electric grill. You have to get past the idea that it's like a George Foreman and it cooks like that.
Yeah.
It's they're going to be significantly better than they have been. They're working on induction grilling and things like that are just going to be completely different than an electric grill that you're used to.
The one I was thinking of, and I know it's been around for a while, but I think I just see them everywhere now, and I'm fascinated by them. I use it myself. Is griddles.
Yeah.
I think griddles is really starting to be. I go into Texas Star Grill Shop every time I go in there. It's like they have a new brand, and they all look pretty dang awesome. I mean, griddles. Do breakfast, do lunch, do dinner. The versatility of it.
Yeah, I would agree that griddles are going to they've been growing at a tremendous pace. Blackstone's been doing, out of grill companies, probably one of the best. Um, but I agree. It's a very versatile tool. Um, where I think it's a little different than, pizza ovens got real hot there for a while, but I feel like
Mhm.
they're kind of tapering off a little bit because there's so much competition. I think griddles, because you can use them so much and, for so many different meals and different types of food, I think their growth pattern is going to keep going. And I know, you know, the Blackstone definitely in the data they released believe that there's still huge growth ahead
Mhm.
of what they're doing.
And you led right into my next topic I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned pizza ovens. That was one part of this question here. The other one is smaller but highly, very very high quality smaller smokers. For condos, for small homes these high up homes that have small backyards. Well, the one I was thinking of like Kevery,
Yeah.
something along those lines. You can do anything in that, and I'm wondering if that's maybe where people in the industry are saying that's a market right there. There are a lot of in a city like Houston where I am right now. I mean, across from the street from me, we live in a home, but are three of those high up, sort of make the most of the space type thing, and they have tiny backyards. I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, I think those are really cool product, and they're new to a lot of people that are home cooks, but that's how a lot of commercial kitchens grill food too. Is they have those charcoal ovens, and you're seeing some new brands like the one you mentioned. There's Charlie's out there, and then Middleby, who owns like Kamado Joe and
Mm-hmm.
Masterbuilt. They also own a company called Jasper, which is a high end version that makes commercial kitchen versions. They're announced this year that they're going to bring that brand to the U.S. as well, and they sell a product just like that for home cooks as well. But yeah, it's a great way to cook. It's extremely efficient. It's just like cooking on a Kamado, just in a box rather than an egg shape.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. All right. So you say we should go elsewhere for the cooking aspect of this, but I'm not. I'm going to ignore what you said. And the reason is I think I've got an angle on here where you can help a lot of our listeners. If you are in the market and you're new to this industry, and a lot of people are coming into the barbecue game as we've been talking about, what are some types of things that you should look for, like as a newbie, but you want quality? What, like, let's say you like to do briskets, or maybe not. You're a steak guy, or maybe not. You're, I'm going to try to make some ribs here. Like, what should our listeners say? Like, I'm listening to this podcast. I've only been really into it for a year or so. What should I get? Kind of is basically the question.
I think the most important thing, and you touched on it earlier with meter, is having a quality meat thermometer, be it a probe or just like a traditional pen type. That is the absolute best thing you can do to improve your barbecue game. It's so important, because until you develop that feel for how long it takes to cook things or how you should be cooking things,
Mm-hmm.
temperature will get you pretty close to where you should be. And that is the one thing I'd recommend to anybody who's learning how to cook.
All right, so now let's get into some things that I mentioned to you off air before we came on here. New people, old pit masters. Some of the things that you see on a daily basis that you cover and review and talk about and give us news on, that every pit master, every backyard pit master, I know meter is on there. I know the probes are on there, but you got to have this if you're going to be serious about this or start getting serious about it. Something in every pit master's garage or whatever.
Beyond temperature probes.
Yeah.
I keep it pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
I go with that. I always want to have a good, I go pretty basic at that. I always have a good knives for both trimming ahead of time and slicing afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
That's key and makes things easier.
How are you on electric? Because I do use electric
Slicers.
Yes.
I've never tried one. I always just use, I have like for brisket, a long scallop knife, and then I just use cheap knives for carving that I replace frequently, but keeping them sharp is really the key.
The other thing for me is a good set of gloves, like the gloves, because you're going to be grabbing the meat. A lot of people don't realize this when they get it. You're going to be grabbing the meat. You're going to be feeling the meat, whether it's over the good gloves, you put plastic or whatever that material is. Gloves to me are big. Obviously, we mentioned the probe. You mentioned some of the things, in terms of wrapping. That's a whole other part of the industry, that has kind of gotten a little crazy on us.
Yeah. I completely second what you said on gloves. I'm real big on food safety, so I use food prep gloves when I cook every single time. That's something that, it makes your life easier, and I don't have to worry about it, about transferring if I'm cooking chicken or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in wrapping, I use the I follow the Franklin butcher paper method.
Paper,
yeah. So, but actually on a pellet grill though, I usually go no wrap just to get a little more bark and a little more flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than that, I'd recommend the butcher paper.
And so bark on a pellet, a lot of people, it turns them off. You can't get it as good, they say. I found that you absolutely can get good bark on a pellet grill. Just depends on how you're cooking it, and that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's, if you follow the best way to cook on an offset, it's not necessarily the best way to cook it on a pellet grill. They're just two different machines. Just think about how the difference in the amount of wood and the amount of airflow that's going through them. So yeah, I think on a pellet grill, I mean, you're not going to get perfect offset bark, but you're going to get some, Instagram worthy bark from a
Yeah.
pellet grill.
Yeah. Now I want to talk to you about social media and the influencers. And I know you mentioned earlier, Traeger has sort of been at at the forefront of that. But this is something that the industry has really started to embrace. You talk about technology. I mean, that is something that I feel like if you're going to develop a product, you have to be in this game, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's there's data on where purchases start, and so many of them start from inspiration from social media.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a big part of marketing to people where they consume information. If you're having a product and grilling, grills or smokers do really well on social media. Blackstone too is another name that has a huge following, but that's where people see it. It's an easy product because people connect with it, so it's an easy product to release content on social
You can
media.
see those juicy pieces of meat, man. There ain't
Exactly.
nothing like it. I've done. Hey, if you go on my social media, you can see plenty of that. That's for darn sure. Just dripping right out of it. All right, last thing before we let you get out of here, and I want to make sure people subscribe and follow your website and stuff. We this is industry based what you're doing, and we talked about what's coming down the pike and how much it's changed. When you look at this industry, where's the apex? Is this one of those where maybe how big of an upside is there for this?
I think it's going to be growing for a really long time. I think if you look historically, there's growth every year for, I don't know, the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they keep releasing new products, which they have, they've shortened kind of the product life cycle. I think it keeps growing, and you're seeing in the data that more and more younger people are getting into grilling as well. So I think it's something that just keeps growing. I think the brands might change a little bit, and who's on top might change a little bit, but it's an industry that has just tons of room for growth.
All right, let's talk about Cookout News. And as I'm talking to you right now, I'm going back onto your web page at cookoutnews.com. And just so our listeners know, I mean, it has everything from new product releases, I guess reviews, and some of the things that Yeti now is doing with pans and such. Walk us through what you do on a daily basis and what people can find on cookoutnews.com.
Yeah, so we try to have at least one article up every single day of the week, every business day. So there's always something new happening in the industry, and we want to cover it. So if you work in the industry, it's essential reading, in my opinion. But if you're an enthusiast, even if you're just getting into it, it's just interesting content to read, where you can learn what's going on, what new things you should be thinking about buying, what things that people aren't buying anymore. All that information we cover on there. And then we also on Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. we do a weekly newsletter where it's just a quick wrap up of this is all the information that was done through the week. So if you like to consume media that way, that's the way we do it.
One thing that fascinated me when I was looking at your website yesterday is, and I don't know if this is good or bad, you tell me, like so many, the term is escaping me, but so many investors are getting into the game that really kind of like Jeremy, that really just see the opportunity there. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I'm a big fan of mom and pop operations that have that their blood is in it, their blood, sweat, and tears is in it. But I also think that there's a good strong place for the CEOs to maybe grow the business and help it and get the quality higher. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, and that's something, with my background in mergers and acquisitions that I'm very familiar with is those groups, those investment groups. I've worked at one in my background, but I'm always hesitant a little bit when it comes to an investment group or buying a company.
Mhm.
There's definitely good ones and bad ones, but I'd say it probably skews a little more bad than good. The right way to do it is if you're buying it because you see there's growth in it and people want the products, you're going to invest into it for a long term
Mhm.
reason. I think those are great. The ones that, on the contrary, that just buy it and then want to kind of gut the operation, run it off its history, and then flip it in a few years, that's where it goes wrong. And I think there's a lot of groups out there. I kind of agree with you. I love founder led or mom and pop businesses that are in the grill industry. But
Mhm.
and that's not to say like Traeger. I think they understand grilling and what it's about, and are definitely worried about innovation. So
I think Big Green Egg has done it successfully, haven't they? Are they still privately owned?
yeah, they are. Big Green Egg is privately owned company. They just had a new CEO and president take
Maybe
over,
that's
but
what I saw. Yeah.
yeah, but he Dan Gertzikoff, actually, I know him. He's a great guy, and that hire is key for them too, because if you talk to him, you can tell he really buys into outdoor cooking, what Big Green Egg's all about. He knows food. He travels around the world to learn different types of cooking, and he's all about it. So it's not just a thing where he's like a CEO from some other company and switched over to this one to run it.
Yeah. Private equity. That's the term. It just hit me.
Yeah.
Private equity is what I was thinking of. Well, and actually, we're working on it anyway in the next month to have Dan Gertzikoff on as well. So it's been fantastic doing this podcast because we're getting some heavy hitters like yourself and others on it, and it's very, very enlightening. And if I've forgotten anything, tell me right now before we move on and let you go that you want to any messaging that you want to get out to our listeners.
No, I think that's it. I appreciate you having me on. This is a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. All right, guys. So next on the Bite Meat podcast, we're going to go out to the Woodlands and Texas Star Grill Shop's DJ Menzel, and we're going to talk about binders with the smoking hot tip of the week. All right. Just